Chapter 3. A Short Rest. They did not sing or tell stories that day, even though the weather improved, nor the next day, nor the day after. They had begun to feel that danger was not far away on either side. They camped under the stars, and their horses had more to eat than they had, for there was plenty of grass, but there was not much in their bags, even with what they had gotten from the trolls. One morning they forded a river in a wide, shallow place full of the noise of stones and foam. The far bank was steep and slippery. When they got to the top of it, leading their ponies, they saw that the great mountains had marched down the very near to them. Already they seemed only a day's easy journey from the feet of the nearest. Dark and drear it did look, though there were patches of sunlight on its brown sides, and behind its shoulders the tips of snow-peaks gleamed. "Is that the mountain?" asked Bilbo, in a solemn voice, looking at it with round eyes. He had never seen a thing that looked so big before. "Of course not," said Balin. "That is only the beginning of the Misty Mountains. We have got to go through, or over, or under those somehow, but before we can come under Winterland beyond. And it is a deal away, even from the other side of them, to the Lonely Mountain in the east, where Smaug lies on our treasure." "Oh," said Bilbo, and just at that moment he felt more tired than he ever remembered feeling before. He was thinking once again of his comfortable chair before the fire in his favorite sitting room, his hobbit hole, and of the kettle singing, not for the last time. Now Gandalf led the way. "We must not miss our road, or we shall be done for," he said. "We need food, for one thing, and rest in a reasonable safety, and also very necessary to tackle the Misty Mountains by the proper path, or else you will get lost in them and have to come back and start at the beginning again, if you ever get back at all." They asked him where he was making for, and he answered, "You are come to the very edge of the wild, and some of you may know, hidden elsewhere ahead of us is the fair valley of Rivendell, where Elrond lives, in the last homely house. I sent a message to my friends, and we are expected." That sounded nice and comforting, but they had not gotten there yet, and it was not so easy as it sounds to find the last homely house west of the mountains. There seemed to be no trees, and no valleys, and no hills to break the ground in front of them, only one vast slope going slowly up and meeting the feet of the nearest mountain. A wide land, color of heather and crumbling rock, with patches and slashes of green grass and moss green showing where water might be. Morning passed, and afternoon came, but in all the silent waste there was no sign of any dwelling. They were growing anxious, for now they saw the house might be hidden almost anywhere between them and the mountains. They came upon unexpected valleys, narrow with deep sides that opened suddenly at their feet, and they looked down in surprise to see the trees below them and running water at the bottom. There were gullies, and they could almost leap over, but very deep with waterfalls in them. There were dark ravines that one could neither jump nor climb. There were bogs. Some of them were green pasture places to look at, with wildflowers growing bright and tall, but a pony that walked there with a pack on its back would never come out again. It was indeed a much wider land from the ford to the mountains than you will ever have guessed. Bilbo was astonished. The only path was marked with white stones, some of which were small, others were half covered with moss or heather. Altogether it was very slow business following the track, even guided by Gandalf, who seemed to know his way about pretty well. His head and beard wagged this way and that as he looked for the stones, and they followed his head, but they seemed so near to the end of the search when the day began to fail. Tea time had long gone and by, and Seemed supper time soon would do the same. There were moths fluttering about, and the light became very dim, for the moon has not risen. Bilbo's pony began to stumble over roots and stones. They came to the edge of a steep fall in the ground so suddenly that Gandalf's horse nearly slipped down the lope. "Here it is at last!" he cried, and the others gathered round him and looked over the edge. They saw a valley, far below. They could hear the voice of the hurrying water, a rocky bed at the bottom. The scent of the trees was in the air, and there was a light on the valley side across the water. Bilbo never forgot the way they slithered and slipped into the dust down in the steep zigzag path of the secret valley of Rivendell. The air grew warmer as they got lower, and the smell of the pine trees made him drowsy, so that every now and again he nodded off and nearly fell off or bumped his nose on the pony's neck. Their spirits rose as they went down and down. The trees changed to beech and oak, and there was a comfortable feeling in the twilight. The last green is almost faded out of the grass, and when they came at length to an open glade not far above the banks of the stream, smells like elves, thought Bilbo. He looked up at the stars, and they were burning bright and blue. Just there came a burst of song like the laughter in the trees. "Oh, what are you doing, and where are you going? Your ponies need shoeing, the rivers are flowing. Oh, tra-la-la-la-lay, here down in the valley. Oh, what are you seeking, and what are you making? The bannocks are reeking, the bannocks are baking. Oh, trilly-lolly-lolly, the valley is jolly. Ha, 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 ha. Oh, where are you going, with beards all wagging, not knowing what brings Mr. Baggins, and bawlin' and dwellin' down in the valley in the June, ha, ha. Oh, will you be staying? Oh, you be flying. Your ponies are straying, the daylight is dying. To fly would be folly, to stay would be jolly, and listen and hawk till the end of the dark, to ah, to na ha." So they laughed and sang in the trees, and pretty far nonsense, I dare you think it. But not that they would care, they would only laugh the more if you told them so. They were elves, of course. Soon Bilbo caught glimpses of them, and the darkness deepened. He loved elves, though he seldom met them, but he was a little frightened of them too. Dwarves don't get on well with them. Even decent enough dwarves like Thorin and his friends think them foolish, which is very foolish to think. Or they do get annoyed with them, for some elves tease them and laugh at them, and most of all at their beards. "Well, well," said a voice. "Just look, Bilbo the Hobbit on a pony. My dear, isn't it delicious? Most astonishing wonderful." Then off they went into another song, as ridiculous as the one I've written down in full. At last, a tall, young fellow came out from the trees and bowed to Gandalf and Thorin. "Welcome to the valley," he said. "Thank you," said Thorin, a bit gruffly. But Gandalf was already off his horse among the elves, talking merrily with them. "You're a little out of your way," said the elf. "That is, if you are making for only one pass across the water and to the house beyond, we will set you right. But you'd best get on foot until you're out over the bridge. Are you going to stay a bit and sing with us, or will you go straight on? Supper is preparing over there, and I can smell the wood fires for the cooking." Tired as he was, Bilbo would have liked to stay a while. Elvish singing is not such a thing to miss in June under the stars, not if you care for such things. And he would have liked to have a few private words with these people that seemed to know his name and all about him, although he'd never seen them before. He thought their opinions of his adventure might be interesting. Elves know a lot, and are wondrous folk for new news, and know what is going on among the people of the land, but as quick as water flows, or quicker. But the dwarves were not all for supper, as soon as possible just then, and would not stay. On they all went, leading their ponies till they were brought to a good path, and so last to the very brink of the river. It was flowing fast and noisily, the mountain streams do of a summer evening when the sun has been out all day and the snow far above. There's only a narrow bridge of stone without a parapet, as narrow as a pony could well walk on, and over that they had to go, slow and careful, one by one, each leading his pony by the bridle. The elves had brought bright lanterns to the shore, and they sang a merry song as the party went across. "Don't dip your beard in the foam, father," they cried to Thorin, who was bent almost on his hands and knees. "It's long enough without watering it." "Mind Bilbo doesn't eat all the cakes," they called. "He is too fat to get through keyholes yet." "Hush, hush, good people, and good night," said Gandalf, who came at last. "Valleys have ears, and some elves have over-merry tongues. Good night." And so at last they all came to the last homely house, and found its door flung wide. Now, it is a strange thing, but things are good to have a day that are good to spend is soon told about, and not much to listen to, while things are uncomfortable, palpitating, and even gruesome, that may make a good tale, and take a deal of telling away. They stayed long in that good house, 14 days at least, and they found it hard to leave. Bilbo would gladly have stopped there forever and ever, even supposing a wish would have taken him right back to his hobbit hole without trouble. Yet there is little to tell about their stay. The master of the house was an elf friend, one of those people whose father came into the strange stories before the beginning of history, the wars of the evil goblins and the elves and the first of men in the north. In those days of our tale, there were still some people who had both elves and heroes of the north for ancestors, and Elrod, the master of the house, was their chief. He was a noble and fair in face as an elven lord, strong as a warrior and wise as a wizard, as vulnerable as a king of dwarves, and as kind as summer. He comes into many tales, but his part of the story of Bilbo's great adventure is only a small one, though important, as you will see if we ever get to the end of it. His house was perfect, whether you'd like food, or sleep, or work, or storytelling, or singing, or just sitting and thinking best, or a pleasant mixture of them all. Evil things did not come into that valley. I wish I had time to tell you even a few of the tales, or one or two of the songs that they heard in that house. All of them, the ponies as well, grew refreshed and strong in just a few days there. Their clothes were mended as well as their bruises, their temperatures, and their hopes. Their bags were filled with food and provisions, light to carry but strong to bring them over the mountain passes. Their plans were improved with the best advice, so the time came to Midsummer Eve, and they were to go on again with the early sun on Midsummer morning. Elrond knew about the runes of every kind. That day he looked at the swords they had brought from the troll's lair. He said, "Those are not troll make. Those are old swords, very old swords of the high elves of the west, my kin. They were made in Gondolin for the Goblin Wars. They must have come from a dragon's hoard or a goblin's plunder, for dragons and goblins destroyed that city many ages ago. This, Thorin, the runes name Orcust, the Goblin Cleaver, in the ancient tongue of Gondolin. It was a famous blade. This, Gandalf, was Glamouring, Fellhammer, and the king of Gondolin once wore. Keep them well." "Whence did the trolls get them, I wonder?" said Thorin, looking at his sword with new interest. "I could not say," said Elrond, "but one may guess that your trolls had plundered other plunderers, or come on the remnants of old robberies in some hold in the mountain of the north. I've heard they still forgotten treasures of old to be found in the desert caverns of the mines of Moria since the dwarves and goblin war." Thorin pondered these words. "I will keep this sword in honor," he said. "May it soon cleave goblins once again." "A wish like that is to be granted soon enough in the mountains," said Elrond. "But show me now your map." He took it, gazed long at it, and he shook his head, for he did not altogether approve of their dwarves and their love of gold. He hated dragons and their cruel wickedness, and grieved to remember the ruin of the town of Dale and its merry bells, and the burned banks, the bright river running. The moon was shining in a broad silver crescent. He held up the map, and the white light shone through. "What is this?" he said. "There are moon letters here. Besides the plain runes which say 5 feet high the door, and 3 may walk abreast." "What are the moon letters?" asked all the hobbits, full excitement. He loved maps, and I've told you before, and he also liked runes and letters and cunning handwriting, though when he wrote himself it was a bit thin and spidery. "Moon letters are rune letters, but you cannot see them," said Elrond. "Not when you look straight at them. They can only be seen when the moon shines behind them. And what is more, then, the more cunning sort it must be that a moon of the same shape and season as the day when they were written. The dwarves invented them and wrote them with silver pens, as your friends could tell you. These must have been written on a midsummer's eve and a crescent moon a long while ago." "What do you say?" asked Gandalf and Thorin together, a bit vexed, perhaps, that Elrond should have found this out first, though really there had not been a chance before. They would have not have been another until good knows when. "Stand by the grey stone when the thrush knocks," read Elrond, "and the setting sun with the last light of Durin's day will shine upon the keyhole." Durin, said Thorin. "He was the father of the fathers of the Elvis race of the dwarves, the Longbeards, and my first ancestor. I am his heir." "Then what is Durin's day?" asked Elrond. "The first day of the dwarves' new year," said Thorin. "Is all should know the first day of the last moon of autumn of the threshold of winter. We still call it Durin's Day when the last moon of autumn and the sun are in the sky together. But this will not help us much, I fear, for it passes our skill in these days again to guess when such time will come again." "That remains to be seen," said Gandalf. "Is there any more writing?" "None to be seen by this moon," said Elrond, and he gave the map back to Thorin. He went down to the water to see the elves dance and sing upon the midsummer's eve. The next morning was midsummer's morning, as fair and fresh as could be dreamed. Blue sky, never a cloud, and the sun dancing on the water. Now they rode away amid songs of farewell and good speed, with their hearts ready for more adventure, and with the knowledge of the road they must follow over the misty mountains to the land beyond. That was Chapter 3, A Short Rest by The Hobbit. Thanks for listening.